You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Weston Williams, joined by Oliver Camacho, Matt Cummings, and Ashley Hardgrave. All right, this week we go inside the huddle with Givonna Joseph, the founder of Opera Creole, and soprano Mary Elizabeth Williams, the star of Opera Creole's upcoming world premiere of Edmond Dede's Morgiane, a collaboration with friend of the show, Opera Lafayette. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, the prima of the Met's new Aida was an event that won't be forgotten soon. And is Paris Hilton the solution to opera's millennial problem? Make sure you subscribe to our podcasts on Spotify. Click follow on Apple Podcasts. Hit the plus sign. Email us your hot takes by writing to mailbag@operaboxscore.com or upload a voice memo using the You Got Something to Say tab on our website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you'll get an OBS beer coaster, an OBS lapel pin, and a #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot take. And without further ado, Oliver Camacho, it's 2025.
It's 2025, and Coco Gauff has found new form, beating Iga Swiatek to lead the U.S. into the United Cup title. That is a tournament I know nothing about, but the news is that Coco Gauff seems to be on track to start the season great. And speaking of the new season, the Australian Open draw will be revealed on the day you're listening to this episode. So why not put a pause on the podcast and go over to your cell phone and see who is who are the seeds, how they're divided. The main draw of Australian Open begins January 12th. That means I won't be sleeping for 2 weeks.
Now that we've lost all of our tennis listeners, Matt Cummings.
I mean, an apropos segue, considering I am a new tennis stan after finally watching Challengers. I did make the mistake of watching it on an airplane. However, was that really a mistake? Not a problem with me. Like, it's other people's problem. I mean, honestly, it's 2025. Get hip or get out of the plane.
Ashley Hardgrave, what would you watch on a plane?
Probably lots of football, because January is one of the last times that you can talk about football. So I've got 2 good calls here. I know it's the beginning of the show, but we're going to do it now because 2025 is the year I woke up and chose chaos. All right. The first thing is, #1, a black head coach is going to be in the FBS National Football Championship for the first time ever. On the day this episode drops, Thursday, we're going to know if it's either Penn State's James Franklin or my personal boyfriend, Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman. Have you seen this man? My God. #2, Bears fans. They ended their season on a win. They finished their 11-game losing streak. It was a fake catch punt return. It resulted in a 94-yard touchdown. There was a winning kick against the Packers, their main rival, with literally 0 seconds left in the game. Bears fans, welcome to the fandom that is the Arkansas Razorbacks. The parallels are everywhere. No matter how much you love your team, they are going to disappoint you. They're going to do it colossally. And at the very end of the season, when it does not matter, they're going to do something spectacular against their biggest rival. And that is somehow going to give you the energy you need to get through next fall. So Bears fans, start wearing red, crack a beer, welcome, Woo Pig.
I mean, I'm all for as many good calls as we can have on the show as possible, given that we're recording on January 6th, 2025, a date which to some people means something bad and to others apparently doesn't. But I'm just like really holding space in the lyrics of Defying Gravity and feeling the power in that personally. And for once, speaking of holding space, I need to hold some space to talk about Beyonce on Christmas, because that performance was so incredible. She looked amazing. She sounded amazing. I could not look away. We were in an Airbnb with like very, very bad internet, and we were praying all day that it was going to keep up to the performance. But the magic of Beyonce Christmas is true magic. And given that she also gave us the best Super Bowl halftime show in like memory for me, like by a wide margin, I'm officially proposing that we just let her do it every year.
I think that's a good idea. You know, I think that Beyonce magic actually rubbed up on us. I got an email from the late, dear departed George Cedarquist this past week, who says, I guided the Opera Box Score fantasy football team to the best record in the Opera Philadelphia League. That's 10-4. We beat Frank Luzzi, friend of the show, and we split a series with David Devan. I don't know what that means because I don't understand fantasy football. We came third overall, which is not bad.
Number
bad.
Number 3. We're number 3.
And he also, in that email, said something about Michigan and Alabama on New Year's, but I wouldn't know anything about that, so we're moving on. Let's talk some opera, please.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
Later this month, Opera Creole and Opera Lafayette will collaborate to present the world premiere of Edmond Dede's Morgiane, a concert production of the never-performed, long-lost work believed to be the earliest extant complete opera by a Black American. The production marks the start of the tenure of friend of the show Patrick Dupuis Quigley as artistic director of Opera Lafayette, and the cast includes friends of the show Kenneth Kellogg and Jonathan Woody, along with Nicole Cabell, heard of her, Chauncey Packer, Joshua Conyers, and one of our guests today, soprano Mary Elizabeth Williams. She joins me with Givonna Joseph, founder of Opera Creole. Welcome to Opera Box Score.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So, Givonna, I'll ask you first, because this is really the big question to help the audience understand what is about to happen early next year. Actually, by the time this airs, it's going to be just in a month, basically. You're going to be producing the world premiere of Edmond Dede's Morgiane. It's the first time this opera will ever be performed. And we need to wind it back to understand who Edmond Dede is and why you, of all people, should be one of the creators of this project. So I guess, should we wind back to the history of Opera Creole?
Oh, I'm happy to talk about it. Opera Creole was founded in 2011, along with my daughter, Aria Mason, a co-founder. And we wanted to do something different in presenting the works of people of color and presenting people of color. We wanted to do it in a way that would break the molds, that we would perform in places where people don't expect to see opera singers. We do Jazz Fest every year. We wanted to do non-traditional in quotes, music, and to highlight the works of the African diaspora, but specifically 19th century New Orleans free composers of color, because that is a part of history that has been dormant and hidden for too long. And that was a particular passion of mine. And it was my daughter, Aria, who came up with the idea of linking our operatic work to restorative justice. And so it brings us to Edmond Dede, who is, as far as we know, this opera is the oldest existing complete opera by a Black American composer. It's quite a feather in New Orleans' cap, but it is unfortunate that it's set for 137 years in his original handwriting. So for some reason, it's one of these things that I always tell students, if it's something on your mind when you wake up in the morning and you wake up and go to sleep at night, it's part of your mission. Pay attention to it. And so for some reason, maybe beyond the veil, Edmond Dede picked me.
Well, can you tell me what was happening in that period in the American, what do you call it, the American South? Like we're talking about Louisiana, the neo-romantic or the Creole romantic composers. There's so many ways to describe them, but I mean, Gottschalk, the composer, was part of that circle, correct? But he's white.
Maybe. There's conversations about that too. Yeah. But we know his father had a second family, and okay. His mother was from Haiti when it was Saint-Domingue. Whether she was of African descent or not, we don't know. But she came to New Orleans from Saint-Domingue after the Haitian Revolution. So we don't know. But anyway, New Orleans is this just great history. And we were so honored to have Mary Elizabeth Williams with us in 2022 because we did a little concert event where we were focusing on early history. As far as documentation, the first city to have a full opera season was New Orleans in 1796. So we are the first city in America to have documented a full opera season. And in this environment where we had the highest in terms of slave trade, we also had the highest of numbers of free people of color in all of North America. Out of this environment came this whole opera and classical world, because we were drawing composers and teachers from France and from Spain and from Italy coming in because we had developed this opera presence. And so several New Orleans free men of color became violinists and played in some of the American premieres of operas from Europe, and were taught by some of the best, and several composers came out of that. Not only Louis Moreau Gottschalk, Victor Eugene McCarthy was the first to study in France. Louis Charles Humbert, who went on to France, and his son Lucien became an acclaimed opera composer in Paris. And there are many. And there was even Basile Barré, who was an enslaved man who was publishing classical piano works while he was enslaved. And so this was an incredible time in our history. And I remember we sang for the Whitney Plantation's gala. The Whitney Plantation is only a slavery museum in the country dedicated to our lives. That a historian came to New Orleans in the mid-1800s and noticed this enslaved woman pushing a cart through the French Quarter, singing an operatic aria in absolute perfection. And he was like, what? What is going on here? And so it is part of our DNA in New Orleans. And it's not an accident that we had these composers grow out of this particular period of time.
Well, I'm going to put a pin in this, and we're going to talk about reconstructing Morgiane in a moment. But I want to turn it to Mary Elizabeth. Mary Elizabeth, by the way, I saw your performance of The Foreign Princess in Rizalka, and I think I even mentioned it when I was interviewing Rayanne Bryce Davis about how you're like 8 feet tall on stage. Like, you're the most like regal woman I've ever seen.
I think it also helped that David Poutney put me on a horse.
Yes.
I was tall plus the horse.
Yeah.
So, I am tall, but I was extra special tall in that match.
But the Foreign Princess gives people an idea of your voice type, but, you also sing, what we call the prima donna assoluta roles. Like, you sing Norma. Am I mistaken? Have you sung Aida?
Oh, yes. Many times.
What people don't know is Norma made its American premiere in New Orleans.
Nice. Always trying to bring it back to New Orleans.
And when I did the concert there a few years ago, I started the concert with Norma because of that. We tried to find repertoire that was somehow linked.
So the audience now can understand what your voice type is, just based on those roles.
I mean, if the audience understands what my voice type is, let them tell me, because I'm still trying to figure it out. My voice, of course, I'm now, next week I'm going to be 48 years old, and I have had a career now for, 20 years, right? And more than 20 years. And so my voice has gone through lots of different iterations, and it's changed and grown. And I just try to stay open. I don't know what necessarily I'm meant to sing. There are a lot of things that I can sing. And what I've recently realized is that people really like me to be mean on stage. They always seem to resonate to me being the bad girl. I just did an Abigaila in Toronto, and people just lapped that up because I think something about my height, my energy. I'm actually quite a nice person, people tell me. But on stage, somehow I'm very believable as the bad girl, as the one that is the troublemaker. So lately in my life, I am getting more opportunities to sing things like Abigaila and the Foreign Princess and, goddesses that...
Angry,
powerful, not shrinking violets.
Okay.
anymore. Although I did my fair share of those as well earlier.
I will tell you that Ari and I fell in love with her when she first came to New Orleans to sing Tosca with New Orleans Opera. It is still my favorite Tosca ever. The voice just is so glorious, and yeah, those parts where when she goes in and the character's like, "I've had enough of this foolishness from you, sir." Everybody loves that. So she sang. And then after that, you did
Trovatore, didn't I?
Trovatore. So that's how we got to be close, because we were singing in the opera chorus at the time. And and so when she did the concert with us, it was a conversation. She would sing and I'd ask some questions and I would get so verklempt every time she would sing. I don't know if I could ask a question.
Well, clearly you have the chops to sing this type of music and you're in demand for it. What attracted you to work with Opera Creole in the first place?
If I'm completely honest, Givonna asked me. I mean, I've known Givonna long enough and I trust her. And I know that she heard, well, she didn't hear it. She saw this and she thought about me and I trusted her. And so when she sent me the score, actually, even before she sent me the score, I sort of said, okay, if you think I can do it, I could probably do it. If I'm free, then I'll do it. And then she sent me the score. And I will say it's quite low, but on some level, that's kind of a nice, it's a nice challenge for me. You know, I'm at an age now where there are no holds barred anymore. I don't have anything to prove anymore. So I can just play around. And I think this role technically says that it's written for contralto. But whatever,
the notes don't say that, especially the higher parts. Because I was like,
it's
when
fine.
It goes up, it's like,
there's a lot of low, but I mean, there's a lot of low when I sing Abigaila too.
Yeah.
Whatever, I think at a certain point, you get to a certain age where you just have to sort of be able to sing, period. And, whether or not you're a soprano or an alto or a mezzo soprano or whatever it is, you just have to figure out how to sing it and make it make sense. And so I'm really looking forward to getting this up on its feet. I mean, I've been working on it for months now by myself, but for me, that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is to get together with everyone else and put it all together like the pieces of a puzzle. And we're not going to be able to do that completely until we have the orchestra. Because, I've been working on it with the piano reduction, which is lovely.
Is that Patrick's piano reduction?
Yes.
All right. So let's go back to this actual opera, Morgiane. Can you tell us how this manuscript came together and what gave you the idea to involve Opera Lafayette and to create, this performing edition, and then to bring in obviously Patrick Dupre Quigley, who takes over as artistic director in a couple of days, I think. And this is like sort of his coming out as the new artistic director. So many things happening with this project. It's almost, a lot writing on the success.
Well, as I keep referring to Dede on the other side of the veil. So I learned that the digital form of this manuscript, the handwritten manuscript, 550 pages, was at Xavier's library. And so I went and they burned me a digital copy. I never knew how it got to Harvard, but Harvard sent it to Xavier. And I've spent 10 years begging people to please do this. Let's do this. The only problem is when somebody's looking at handwriting, you got to spend a lot of money to get it from handwriting into
finale,
note by note. And so I stuck for financial reasons. So in the spring of 2023, I finally got someone said, I will invest in this. And so I'm having these conversations, getting everything going. And then just out of the blue, Patrick seemed to have come across it. And somebody said, find Givonna Joseph in New Orleans. And that's how we connected. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. And it was, it was a thing. I heard I should talk to you. Let's have a Zoom call. And it went from there. And we just seemed to just automatically be very simpatico and in the determination to get all these notes in the computer and go from there. And of course, I had to go to the French consulate. They offered to pay for the original translations because I didn't know what the story was. It was just, I had a rough look at it, but so it just kind of just all happened from there. And then after that, the Historic New Orleans Collection, the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra, they came on board, and it's just been a lot of work for the last year and something.
So can we talk about what this premiere is going to look like? It's going to take place over a few different cities and with some different orchestras depending on where it's at.
In New Orleans, it will be the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra. It will be semi-staged, costumed. But when we go to the East Coast for DC, New York, and Maryland, it will be Opera Lafayette's orchestra and in concert form.
So it'll be even lower, huh? By like a half step.
And so I'm hoping when we finish with this run, I can come back and actually do it fully staged with all the sets and all the bells and whistles. But this is how we're getting started.
Well, Mary Elizabeth, since you've been living with this score for a couple months now, is there another composer or another genre of composers that this feels like to you?
Well, that's hard for me to answer at this point because, as I said, I have not experienced the full iteration with orchestra. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be very interesting. As far as the colors, my understanding of it is just based on the harmonies. But as you well know, because you're a musician as well, so much of a composer's style is in how he writes for the orchestra and who he chooses to keep the melody going at any given time, or how he keeps the rhythm. And the thing that I really am enjoying about this score is that it is I believe that the ensemble writing is very, very beautiful and much more nuanced and sort of pure in a way that I don't usually get to sing in the repertoire that I sing, which is romantic and usually later. This has more of a classical era flair to it.
Where the chords line up in nice...
Exactly.
Yeah, vertically.
I said to my mom when I first started reading it, this is much more vertical. And I'm used to singing things that are horizontal, which I thought about saying to you, but then I said, the poor audience is going to have no idea what I mean.
We have a lot of nerdy listeners, though.
Okay. But it is a much more vertical construction. And, when I was young, I went to school that was famous for its choral tradition. And I sang in choruses the entire time I was in university. And it takes me back to that sort of locking in that you find with a chorus that I miss very much because, romantic music is not about that at all, ever. So I'm looking forward to playing around with the other singers and finding those moments to make that kind of shimmery, classical era music that's maybe a little more innocent than the repertoire that I usually sing. Musically innocent.
Well, speaking of the cast, I wanted to ask what it's like working with all of these excellent colleagues.
Nicole Cabell and I.
So who has the prima donna role? You or Nicole?
Nicole.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I play the mom.
Really? Okay. I don't know the story, so I have no idea.
So Morgiane, I am Morgiane, and I am the mother. And my husband and I, we are giving away my daughter, who is Nicole. And she's getting married. The story opens that she's getting married. And I And my husband at that time, for whatever reason, decided this is the perfect moment to tell my daughter that she is not actually my husband's child, which I think is a little bit weird already. I mean, why would we choose that moment? But whatever. In front of the entire wedding party, we're like, this is not your daddy, honey. And then we explain the whole story. We say that I ran away from this horrible man that was mistreating me, and that the man that raised her as her father is actually just my second husband. And at any rate, then everyone wants to know, inquiring minds want to know, who is your father? And of course, I refuse to say. And I say, this is not the right time. This now is not the right time for me to tell you who is your real father. It's just the right time for me to tell you that this is not your real father. A little weird. Anyway, so then in the second scene, the Sultan's messenger comes in and says, basically, the Sultan has taken an interest in your pretty daughter, and he's decided that he wants to marry her. And so the messenger, after some fighting and words, absconds with my daughter. And so then the rest of the opera is about getting her back, how to get her back, what to do, how we can go about fighting this basically unbeatable foe. I mean, trying to go against the Sultan is something that is impossible. But I insist, we insist, the whole family, and along with her fiancé, everybody is, actually it's not her fiancé, it's her husband, because they did actually get married.
They do get married, yeah.
But it doesn't matter to the Sultan, obviously. He wants her for his harem, and that's the end of it.
That's the end of it.
And so then, I won't say exactly what happens in the end, because you should come
spoiler alert, yeah.
Yeah. But at the end, I reveal some information that changes everything.
Yeah.
So I would say that I am not the hero. I mean, I am the keystone of the story, but the ingenue of the story is my daughter in this piece. If that makes sense.
And one of the things that I love so much about this work is, as Dede was born a free man of color, in New Orleans in 1827. He left as things were getting more and more oppressive for free people of color. He said, I got to get out of here. And he found more freedom in France, but he tried in every way in some of his works that I've noticed to speak against oppression. And so he writes this strong character, Morgiane, who dares to go up against the Sultan. I mean, she's a strong woman. She said, I'm going to get my daughter back. And I love that's a little bit of a theme, even though it's a comedy in the end. There's that theme of resistance and fighting against the powers that be. And that her daughter, Amine, does the same thing. She's like, you might want me for your harem, but I ain't going. She doesn't want to be submissive. And so here he writes these strong people going up against the system, so to speak. And I love that.
Yeah. And we all live to tell about it. I mean, nobody died.
Yeah, nobody died in the end. So,
that much I will say.
Part is that best part too for me, the funniest part, is that he allows the Sultan, who is a bad guy, but there's moments he's like, how come these people aren't just doing what I say?
Yes, there is a fair amount of confusion in the Sultan, that he even has to, engage in these back and forth.
Yeah, I understand. What's going on here? Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
It sort of reminds me a bit of like in Marriage of Figaro, where the Count is like, wait a second, I'm the Count here. Why is everybody fighting me?
Yes, exactly. I think when I first started working on this, I did say it's sort of like a French Mozart. It's not, actually. I think musically it's not like Mozart, but it is from the same time period of those kinds of stories, family dramas with questions about, who actually sired this person, that kind of thing. Yeah. So in that way, it's a little bit more Mozartian than the things that I've been doing lately. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it opens in Arabia, and then it moves to Persia. And I know there was that whole period of exoticism. We want to pick exotic locations, but sometimes I do stop and also look at him as a Black man and think, okay, was there something else about those locations? And I found out that the Arabia was very multicultural, and the people that were there, and the trade between Persia and Africa was very real. So I'm learning a lot about that, and to see if there's any subtext in that.
Well, hopefully we will live with this piece for a long time and get to figure out all of these threads that we can pull on. Thank you so much for taking the time to give us information about this world premiere by Edmond Dede. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Just a little sample of the music of Edmond Dede. That was a piece called Chicago.
Hey.
Performed by the Hot Springs Music Festival, conducted by Richard Rosenberg. Dates for the world premiere of Morgiane. The first concert, January 23rd in New Orleans. The first DC presentation on February 3rd at the Lincoln Theater. Then it jumps over to Manhattan for Jazz at Lincoln Center, February 5th. And then back to the DC area for a performance at University of Maryland on February 7th. The first performance is performed with the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra on modern instruments, and for the following three performances performed by the Opera Lafayette Period Orchestra. My thanks to Opera Creole and Givonna Joseph and Mary Elizabeth Williams.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
A number of problems plagued the Metropolitan Opera's premiere of their new production of Aida. The widely panned New Year's Eve performance featured an audibly ailing Piotr Beczała as Radames and probably ailing Dmitry Beloselsky as Ramphis. Meanwhile, a fedora-hatted extra was lowered into the Egyptian temple set only to take a tumble while disengaging from his rope. Seok Bak has replaced Beczała for the following two performances, and Morris Robinson is taking the place of Beloselsky, with Harold Wilson stepping in for Morris Robinson as the king.
Mezzo-soprano Katia Ledoux is speaking out about being booed at the Vienna Volksopera's New Year's Eve performance of Fledermaus. This new production presents Prince Orlovsky as a nihilistic, closeted gay character. Said Ledoux, "I did my best. If I didn't do anything wrong, what if I've been booed because I am something wrong? Maybe it's the ghosts of the right-wing election results that empower people to boo at any artist who doesn't conform to a very specific ideal of appearance, ethnicity, sexuality, or political opinion."
Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie premiered their opera Sanus Opera at LA's Saban Theater. Yes, you heard that right. It's just one scene in the duo's new television sequel celebrating the 20th anniversary of The Simple Life. The series follows their return to Altus, Arkansas, as they attempt to produce an opera, featuring encounters with Thomas Adish, Beth Morrison, and Gustavo Dudamel. The resulting Sanus Opera is a pastiche of public domain scores, imposing their catchphrase over Verdi, Wagner, Bizet, and Delibes.
Last month, a $13.8 million operatic performance entitled Again 2024 Turandot has ended its run in Seoul after accusations of mismanagement, unpaid fees, and dramatic exits from the creative team. Director David Livermore and conductor Paolo Carignani both left the production at the last minute due to repeated disputes with artistic director Park Hyun-jun and radio silence from the rest of the production team. Audiences jumped ship too, demanding refunds after the venue reduced seating from 6,800 to 4,000 without any prior notice.
In an update to a previous Drill story, Bayreuth-Intendantin Katharina Wagner is indeed disappointed by the decision to cut 4 operas from the Bayreuth Festival's 2026 season. But what should you do? You can't close your eyes to reality, said Wagner.
The 3 major opera companies in Berlin, Staatsoper unter den Linden, Komische Oper, and Deutsche Oper, released a joint statement following recently announced €130 million cuts. Quote, "The Senate is taking the breath out of cultural life. Berlin lives through its culture. The cuts threaten jobs, cultural diversity, and the very essence of this city. Let us work together to safeguard the culture for future generations."
Francois Xavier Roth is off the legal hook for sexual harassment as the criminal investigation has been discontinued due to insufficient grounds. The conductor came under scrutiny following a report by Le Canard d'Enchaîné claiming that 7 musicians accused him of sexual harassment and another woman accused him of sexual assault.
The Palais Garnier in Paris has planned quite a birthday party to celebrate its 150th anniversary this year, kicking off with a gala later this month featuring Thomas Dunford, Juan Diego Flores, Lisette Oropeza, Léa Desandré, and Ludovic Tézier. In May, the Rolex ambassadors, Sir Bryn Terfel, Sonia Yoncheva, Juan Diego Flores, and Rolando Villazon will give another concert. Finally, in October, the house will open an exposition detailing its history and featuring historic costumes.
Major awards alert! Congrats to friend of the show Lawrence Brownlee for receiving France's Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters, not going to try that in French, and to Karolina Podolak for receiving Poland's Bronze Cross of Merit.
In trade news, Opera Saratoga has announced that Amanda Roby will become the company's new executive director, having previously served as its managing director.
We were off of 2-Minute Drill for several weeks, and therefore we missed a lot of people who have unfortunately passed since December, so excuse our brevity. Exit stage right. South Korean tenor Sehun Moon has died by suicide at the age of 39. French soprano Anne Magouet has died of cancer. Dutch mezzo Elspeth Gerritsen died at 53.
American soprano and vocal coach Loretta DeFranco has died at 83. American mezzo Maria Jonas has died, along with fellow American mezzo Regina Safardi, who died at age 90. German soprano and mezzo Sigrid Kell has died at age 95, and English soprano Jeanette Sinclair has died at 96.
And on this day, January 6th, there was only one first performance that we know of, which was Ground's opera Montezuma, with a libretto by Frederick the Great. That was in 1755.
And what a premiere.
I know. Birthdays include Italian composer Giuseppe Sammartini in Milan in 1695, Italian baritone Gottardo Alighieri, born in Lazise, Lake Garda in 1824. He created the role of Barnaba in La Gioconda. In 1838, German composer Max Bruch was born in Köln. In 1858, it was the birth of Welsh tenor Ben Davies and Pontardawe, who sang in the premiere of Sullivan's Ivanhoe. Tenor Emilio de Marchi was born in Voghera. He created the role of Cavaradossi in Tosca, and he was born in 1861. Bass baritone André Pernet was born in Rambersville in 1894, who created the title role of Oedipe in Enescu's opera by the same name. In 1903, soprano Mafalda Favera was born in Portomaggiore. Among other things, she sang in the premiere of Wolf-Ferrari's Dama Roba and created the role of Wolf-Ferrari's Gaspari in his opera Campiello. And on this day, January 6th, happy birthday to mezzo-soprano Shirley Love, born in Detroit.
And that's your 2-Minute Drill.
A little bit of Sehun Moon singing Que Gelida Manina from the 55th Tenor Viñas competition with the Orchestra Sinfonica del Liceo directed by Sergio Alapont. This death at age 39 is sparking a little conversation about the need for mental health support for opera singers. I'll say that at least on Facebook, we do have a group that sprung up during the pandemic for just check-ins, mental health amongst the mostly classical music singing community. But I'm sure other people are in that group. Yeah, it's tough. We talk about it all the time. Separation from your family, expectation to be perfect at every performance.
Financial
pressures, what people say in the comments, what people say when you're playing a nihilistic gay character. More on that later on. It's, you have to really love this business. You have to really, really love this business. And I do resent that when you're like in college or when you're coming up, you hear people say, if there's something else you can do that instead. I don't like that advice, but I definitely understand it.
Yeah, it's a big problem, not just in opera, but in the arts. I've seen, I sort of was more embroiled in the theater world here in Chicago for my first couple of years in the city, and name me one actor who hasn't had a mental health crisis that needed help, and there's not much in the way of organized help on any sort of
No, it's hard enough
level.
To get that kind of support when you have a stable job with benefits.
Exactly.
As a freelancer.
Yeah, and like decent health insurance. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, and you combine this with what the Surgeon General Vivek Murthy has been speaking about for the last year or two, which is this loneliness epidemic that we have across the country. So it's sort of, there's so many layers to it. It's like the more connected we are, the more isolated we are. And if there are behavioral health issues, they're only exacerbated by not only the lifestyle that a transient opera singer leads, but just even when we're around people, we're not around people. And so it's so heartbreaking that this had to happen to Sehun, or not had to happen, but you know what I mean, that it happened to Sehun. But I am hopeful that it sparks a global conversation about behavioral health.
And I think that's a good lead in to us.
Speaking of another type of health,
let's talk about this production, and everyone in this production has done really good work. Let's lead with that.
For those of you who have not had a chance to read the reviews, long story short, about the prima of the new Aida at the Met, Piotr Beczała was obviously not well enough to sing, but he still sang.
Yep.
And it wasn't until the intermission that Peter Gelb came out and said, Piotr Beczała was indisposed, but he continued to sing and apparently took some phrases down the octave, and his voice was breaking, and it just was uncomfortable for everybody involved. It doesn't make any sense that they would let him go out on stage.
I mean, it's everyone's worst nightmare to be in that situation.
It was very strange. I have yet to see a performance be as critically panned, I think. There have been a number of reviews, some very dramatic. There's a particularly entertaining one by a friend of the show at Opera Wire. Is it David Salazar? One of the Salazars. And it is vivid.
Who is not usually the most acerbic critic out there, but it read like something off of Parterre Box.
And that's the thing. I've been seeing some outlets that are usually if anything, way really pulling their punches, being this is, even beyond the fact that Beczała is sick and there were other illnesses in the cast, and the mishap with the extra in the Indiana Jones hat. They also didn't like the production. Right. They thought it was it's got this weird
Indiana Jones theme. Which if you read a lot of the interviews talk about how the concept of this production is kind of trying to hang a lantern on the fact that this is a very exoticized piece of work that's ostensibly about Egypt, but very, very Orientalist. And I mean, not Orientalist because it's the Middle East instead of the Far East, but the same principle applies here. And it's what if all of this is in the imaginations of the archaeologists who are finding it in the tomb, which one of the reviews, as soon as I read that, and one of the reviews, I think it was David Salazar's, mentions, that is shockingly similar to the framing device that Elton John and Tim Rice put onto this when they converted it into a musical in the 90s. Like, that was the first thing that came to my mind. I was like, oh, their reincarnations met in a museum with the archaeologists, Adam Pascal in a white t-shirt. What?
No, thank you.
I am begging the Mets, if you're going to, produce recontextualized versions of classics, make sure they're good. Just try Regietheater, just a little bit for me. We don't have to have Indiana Jones coming in.
Before we stray too far from the Piotr Beczała of it all,
the Beczała Brouhaha, if you will.
Exactly.
Beczała Brouhaha.
I have a story, and I'm going to protect the main character of the story. I won't say their name, but
their names are changed to protect the innocent.
Exactly. This singer was making their put in the name of the house here debut, and that opera company also broadcasts their performances in HD theaters, and was not up to singing on the day of the HD broadcast, and wanted to use the cover, wanted to bow out. They would not let them bow out. This is I'm getting this information from that artist, and that artist went on sick and was very concerned for how they would be perceived by the public who was meeting this artist for the first time, being their debut, but was a big part of the marketing plan for this production of this opera, and probably will not be invited back because they were so upset about their experience, and maybe, spoke against their management in a way that damaged their potential to be hired back.
Well, and I think you said the magic word there, which was marketing. So when you think from the other side of this, they're, especially in a production like this with Beczała singing opening night is on New Year's Eve, like there's all of these stakes around this. So I imagine, again, not to give this credit or say they were correct in any way, but if you've got all of this money and all of these patrons that are paying this money specifically to see insert name here at this production, and that these are the people that you're going to need to continue your company, I could see where your moral compass would sort of shift a little bit on this when it comes to vocal health. Is it correct? Absolutely not. But I imagine that's part of what happened with Beczała at the Met. I imagine enough people were like, you'll be fine, because what would be worse to them in that moment after, not seeing this backlash already, but what felt worse to them in the moment was having Beczała not go on.
Which to me, remains unfathomable, to be honest.
Completely unfathomable.
Audiences are famously very, forgiving of covers. They tend to give them wide latitude because of the circumstances in which they're going on, and hold them to not as high of a standard, which I don't even really know how fair that is, but it is the truth. And they also tend to be very appreciative of covers for saving the day and preventing a catastrophe of a performance like it sounds like this was from basically every account.
Yeah, illnesses happen. I mean, listen to my voice right now. I'm not exactly in, tip-top vocal shape myself.
And yet we're forcing you to go on at gunpoint.
That's right. Well, it's Peter Gelb called me earlier and was like, yo, you gotta do this.
A friend of this show, Frank Lepardo, posted this to his social media, and he has given permission for this to be shared. So I'm going to read it directly off of his Facebook. Things you will never hear a presenter say. 1. We have a cover for you. You don't need to feel pressure to go on this evening if you're not up to it. 2. We have made an appointment for you to see a doctor. 3. You have our full support. We understand that no one gets sick on purpose. 4. Your vocal health and longevity come first. 5. This is not your only engagement. Take care of your instrument. Remember, your voice and your career are in your hands. If you lose your voice and your income, no one will help you. Nobody cares if you sing or not. Your successor is waiting in the wings. Protect yourself because no one else will.
I mean, that really sums it all up, honestly.
Speaking of protecting yourself in a slightly different way, let's talk a little about this story from Katia Ledoux in, Vienna?
Yeah.
This is a really interesting story because apparently, so obviously this was what Deflatormouse.
Mm-hmm. Deflatormouse on New Year's Eve is like the most Viennese of Viennese tradition.
That's the most Viennese thing you can possibly
Sylvester.
do. So
yeah,
you're coming in with another sort of edgy take, which I will say is maybe not the most conducive to the. This would be the most conservative of the conservative music audiences in Vienna, the New Year's Eve performance of Die Fledermaus. And
Vienna in general is not as progressive in their opera tastes as Germany. Like more than Americans, but like not huge fans of Regie Theater in general.
Right.
Yes, and Katja Ledoux is a person of color, and when she came out on stage for her bows, she was booed, and some of that could be attributed to the production, but generally speaking, those audiences are savvy enough to know
to boo the director.
And honestly, speaking as someone who really wants the audience to be engaged, I don't mind an edgy production getting a boo every now and again. But the conflation of the singer with the role, or perhaps her physical characteristics being, more on the left, being a little bit more, being a black person in general, there is, it felt to her, and I, reading the accounts of what's going on, I don't think this is out of nowhere, that there might have been a racist element to it.
Not racism in Europe. That would never happen.
That doesn't happen.
Never.
We can't say this for sure, obviously. We weren't there. I wasn't there. I don't know what the vibes were. But it is certainly suspicious. And I think it's very brave of her to speak out about this feeling that there is this sense of unwelcomeness following some of the political upheaval, not just in Austria, but around the world over the past year.
Right-wing retrenchment.
Can we relate to that here in America? And it's, this is something that, we really need to make sure we're keeping our fingers on the pulse of as the years, unfortunately, go on. Can I say with certainty this was exactly what happened? No, but I would not be surprised, and it is something that if we think it's there, it should be called out, and the people who are on the receiving end of that kind of treatment should receive support.
We're now in an era where she can speak out like this. When not even a decade ago, no singer would have dared. And she spoke very eloquently and very graciously. We truncated the quote a little bit, but she said, I tried my best. I really did. But, I can't think of any other reason, why this would have happened. Maybe it's this. A decade ago, the cone of silence that would have completely blacklisted her, pun possibly intended, from never performing in European houses, at least, and I'm saying some things that are going to get me in trouble this week, but maybe it's the cold meds. At least we are now in an era where she can say these things freely, and it is not going to jeopardize her career because she's pretty young and she's very good, and she deserves to keep singing, and she deserves to keep saying exactly what's on her mind.
Let's talk about another little disaster, because there's been a lot of disasters the past month or so.
Getting us in the 2025 mood.
What the heck is happening in Korea right now?
I just want to remind everybody of a meme that said 2025 started with the day's WTF, and I think that is appropriate for talking about what happened in Korea.
These articles were honestly extremely hard to follow about every single thing that could go wrong with Back of House in this production of, again, 2024 Turandot. The creative team was back again. The creative team was backbiting. They wouldn't give people schedules. Our favorite tenor turned baritone turned conductor turned opera producer, whose name I still refuse to say on this show, was involved, of course. No one had seat assignments. The auditorium was downsized without any notice. They just told people to sit wherever. Just real cluster, as they say.
Millions. This is an expensive production too, and it has the vibe of remember last year that Willy Wonka experience in terms of how it all played out. This was a real mess, and I did not hear about it at all until it was already over, and I'm so curious dig behind the scenes. So if anyone was listening who knows exactly what was happening in Korea, any of our Korean listeners, please do let us know. Mailbag at operaboxscore.com. Truly a wild story. We got to wrap things up pretty soon, but I did want to, give some space, save some space,
hold
some space for
really finding the power in that.
I really want to find the power in Paris Hilton.
Okay, listen. This is very personal to me, and here's why. Because the show The Simple Life is about a fish out of water scenario where these very wealthy debutantes go to a place that is perceived as very backwards and very country and very redneck. And it is the town of Altus, Arkansas, which is 40 miles from my hometown of Dover and Russellville, Arkansas. This is in the Arkansas River Valley. These are my people. When this came out, we were not very happy because our people were portrayed in a very backwards fashion. At any rate, let's talk about Sanasa, the opera, first of all. The fact that these people can walk into any room and usually get what they want, and many places they do. I think it's hilarious that they got turned down by Beth Morrison. They got turned down by Dudamel. They got turned down by Oddish not once but twice. I have not seen the show because I will not give it any eyeballs because, again, still angry about something that happened 20 years ago that insulted my people. However, this Sanasa phrase that they have, what that actually is a bastardization of the opening horn riff of Elvis Presley's CC Rider. And that was their catchphrase as they were on the show. So just a quick little thing. They start by ripping off Elvis. And then what do? They get $1 million from the Hilton company to produce this. So again, I love that we're in this Eat the Rich era. And I really hope that the charm that these people had when they were doing this show 20 years ago is gone. Listen, Trump's going to be president again. Nothing matters anymore. So I hope this tanks, even though they use the word opera and more people are talking about it. That's as far as I can go as being excited about it.
I mean, if it does well, maybe they can, Bayreuth can call them for financial advice. Let's wrap this show up.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. That's how we end the show, and that's how we begin this year, 2025. Let's start it off with Oliver Camacho.
Well, mine is actually both a good call and a bad call. The bad call goes to English National Opera for their bad social media posts in December.
Write an open letter about it. I don't know what to tell you.
Giving the most kind of tropey, stereotypical definitions for some terms in opera. For example, one of the posts in big heading, it says aria, noun, and the definition: when one singer decides to hijack the stage for 10 minutes just to let everyone know they've been training for this moment since birth. It's basically the opera equivalent of look at me, I'm so talented.
Rough.
So there's a bunch of these that are all pretty insulting to our craft. And Helena Dix, a social media warrior, actually, she rewrote some of them to make them more funny and actually, less mean towards our craft. So thanks, Helena Dix, for correcting English National Opera's stupid posts.
Opera needs all the support it can get. We don't need to sabotage it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Matt Cummings.
We are getting a little bit of a helping hand, I will say, from my good call, bad call, similar to Oliver, is this article in Current Affairs that we will share out in our show notes. This is variations on a theme that comes up every once in a while of a layman's person of, hey, why opera's actually pretty cool and you should ignore all the stereotypes you think about it because it can be a very satisfying experience. And I would say that, like, in that genre of article, it's one of the better written ones that I've ever gone through. So definitely worth checking out. However, if you have the opportunity when you're talking about the opera as sports metaphor to mention a very popular and beloved podcast critically acclaimed even, premised on that very parallel. I mean, it seems like a shout out would have been nice.
Bad call.
The one, the only Ashley Hardgrave.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm about to change your life. Buckle up. There is a documentary that is currently out on Max, and it is incredible. It is called Yacht Rock, the Documentary. Doc is spelled D-O-C-K.
As it should be.
It talks about the fake genre that is yacht rock, which is basically like soft rock from 1976 to 1984. We're talking Steely Dan, Doobie Brothers, Loggins and Messina, Loggins without Messina. So there was a comedy web series that came out in 2005, pre-YouTube, that talked about the fake how these songs came to be, and it grew to such popularity that it took over the country. It took over YouTube. Sirius XM Radio put out a yacht rock channel. None of this was supposed to ever be called yacht rock. There's only the one boating reference is Christopher Cross's Sailing, and then the captain in Tennille's captain's hat. That's it. And so the filmmakers tell the story of how this exploded, but then they tell the story of the actual music itself. It's absolutely incredible. You're talking about this comedy series, and all of a sudden Michael McDonald is sitting there. He's sitting next to Kenny Loggins. He's sitting next to the founding members of Toto, who, by the way, if you didn't know, played on Michael Jackson's Thriller album. It's this crazy incestuous thing
produced by Quincy Jones.
Exactly. And so if you're a music nerd of any type, and this is music that, like, I unapologetically love the genre of yacht rock because it slaps, okay? If you've ever listened to Steely Dan's Asia, it is a masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece. So at any rate, Yacht Rock, the documentary, you can stream it on Max, then DM me so that we can talk about it for like 6 hours.
Yeah, Ashley's playlists are all, Steely Dan, Beyonce, like Mozart, and then way at the bottom is Paris Hilton. That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Get your voice heard and find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. That's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. Your announcer is Norm Waddell, your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is me. The executive producer of the OBS is George Cedarquist. For co-hosts Matt Cummings and Ashley Hardgrave with guests Givonna Joseph and Mary Elizabeth Williams, I'm Weston Williams, no relation, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you take down your Christmas decorations and the Harris Waltz lawn signs. We're back with an all-new show next week when we share our 2025 opera resolutions, plus you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more nihilistic closeted gay characters. Join us.